polarization? How can they be used to promote democracy and human rights? Social media networks and ideological polarization. Power relations and sociocultural impact. A conference by Al Jazeera Center for Studies and the Mass Communications Department at Qatar University. On the 1st and 2nd of March 2023.
وما دور هذه الشبكات في الاستقطاب الأيديولوجي؟ كيف يمكن استخدامها في تعزيز الديمقراطية وحقوق الإنسان؟
Have international powers used social media networks to manage their wars and conflicts? What is the role of these networks in ideological polarization? How can they be used to promote democracy and human rights? Social media networks and ideological polarization. Power relations and sociocultural impact. A conference by Al Jazeera Center for Studies and the Mass Communications Department at Qatar University. On the 1st and 2nd of March 2023. Have international power.
We would like to welcome you to the first session of day 2 of our conference, Social Media Networks and Ideological Polarization, Power Relations and Sociocultural Impact, organized by Al Jazeera Center for Studies and Qatar University. We will have a keynote speech by Dr. Nabil Dajani, the title of which is The Ethical and Legal Structure for a Just Social Media Public Sphere. Most researchers, experts, and users themselves agree that among the main challenges before social media platforms is the regulations and the terms and conditions of use of this media in a digital world where social media platforms are becoming the business. This has led to many communicative practices that polluted media by falsifying news, by publishing fake news, and here lies the challenge at the national, regional, and international level, as there is a strong polarization in today's world. This would make the problem worse. We will not, through our conference, try to diagnose what's happening as part of this polarization, but we will try to come up with solutions that would lead to a better ethics in the use of social media platforms. We are pleased to have in this session Dr. Nabil Dajani. He is a professor of media studies at the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Media Studies at the American University of Beirut, where he also served as Assistant Dean of its Faculty of Art and Sciences. Mr. Dajani was also a visiting scholar at Leicester University in England and a Fulbright scholar at Georgetown University. Between 1971 and 1975, he was a member of the UNESCO's International Panel of Experts on Communication Research that contributed to initiating the international debate for a new world communication order. But please join me in welcoming Dr. Nabil Dajani. Good morning. I hope that my speech or presentation today will be slightly different than yesterday's deliberations. Yesterday's presentations were rather positive, and unfortunately, my intervention will not be very positive when it comes to social media platforms.
ملاحظة أولى ما بعرف قد إيه حتكون مدة مداخلتي
I do not know how long I will take.
أنا عمري 86 سنة
I still did not I still did not get to catch up my breath. I am 86 years old. It takes me some time to
تذكر
go into the gists of it. When I was
المداخلة لازم تكون المداخلة الجيدة
in college, I had a professor who used to tell me a presentation should be long enough
تغطي
to cover
تكون decent
the topic of discussion,
بعدين تكون قصيرة enough
but it has to be short enough to be an interesting one.
مداخلتي اليوم
I hope my
من هالنوع
speech today will be or will hit these two requirements.
In a provoking article entitled The Age of Social Media,
في مقالة
The Age of Social Media is ending.
عنوانها
It never should
عصر
have begun.
وسائل التواصل
The
الاجتماعي
Atlantic
ينتهي
magazine contributing. Sorry. حدا عم بيحكي معي؟ In a provoking article entitled The Age of Social Media is Ending. It should never have begun. The Atlantic magazine contributor E.M. Bogost argues that social media was never a natural way to work, play, and socialize, though it did become second nature. It produced a positively unhinged, sociopathic redemption of human sociality, polarizing, offensive, or just plain fraudulent information. Fraudulent information was optimized for distribution. The whole idea of social networks was connecting, not publishing, deepening relationships mostly with people one knew. However, connection was a primary purpose, has declined. Social networks developed into social media that offered platforms through which people could publish content as widely as possible, well beyond their networks of immediate contacts. By the time the platforms realized that the public revolted, it was too late to turn off these feedback loops. He maintained that to win the soul of social media, we must learn to muzzle it again. Across the globe, among billions of people, to speak less to fewer people and less often. We cannot make social media good because it's fundamentally bad. Deep in its very structure, all we can do is hope that it withers away and play our small part in helping abandon it. Discussing the role of social media in politics in a chapter discussing the role of social media in a chapter of a book on rethinking the world we knew, Diana Owen observes that the new political social media system evolved haphazardly, with no guiding principles or goals, Consequently, she argues that we are living in a post-era that mark a new law for the democratic imperative for a free press and the role of fake news that are attached to fictitious stories made to appear as if they were the real news. Professor of Social Theory at Swarthmore College, Barry Schwartz, argues in his 2004 book, The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less, that too many choices had بدي احط عويناتي لانه ما عم شوف للاسف الشديد. Okay, now it's much better. He argued that too many choices lead to less choice and confusion. And Kate Lindsay proposes that the social media platforms are presently less relevant than ever. She expounds that indulgence in the use of social media makes it hard to find our friends and rationalizes that it turns out that gathering more than a quarter of the world's population in one place creates the same problem as inviting too many random people to a party. So with this introduction, I can sort of get into my subject. The debate on the role of social media is still in its infancy. No one can claim that they know that they have definite answers about the magnitude of this role, its impact and effectiveness. Social media effects are only one of the several political, economic, social, and cultural aspects that influence mass popular movements. The interdependence of mass media with modern electronic media technologies resulted in the revolution that highlighted enormous possibilities in the field of communication, including the development of the World Wide Web system. This network has changed to the system of human interaction and opened up new areas of communication that one could not have dreamed of. The Worldwide Area Network, Internet, launched qualitative revolution in the possibilities of mass communication and led to the development of modern social media platforms. These platforms have changed the pattern of media communication and are no longer limited to messages sent in one direction, often these platforms have changed the pattern of media communication and are no longer limited to messages sent in one direction from channels owned by states or from the other owners, individuals or institutions who have the material and technical means. The introduction of the Internet and its innovation opened new opportunities for interaction among individuals and groups. The upsurge of social media platforms in the worldwide witnessed the opening of new interaction avenues, allowing individuals and groups to share information and connect in new, previously conceived to be unattainable. In theory, social media allows everyone to interact with it or its audience by sharing and expressing. However, the reality is that there are significant obstacles and cautions to such interaction. While the social media platforms have opened new prospects of sharing information and connecting among individuals, there is also evidence to suggest that social media have detrimental effects. Social media have become an unescapable presence in the daily lives of people. Through the social media, individuals and groups can find and engage with others who can relate to their opinions and experience. Content shared on social media can potentially increase audience reach and message significance. We are constantly connected through platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and more. These new media platforms have established themselves as powerful channels for public discourse and an integral part of the public sphere, allowing for a comprehensive exchange of ideas. Alternatively, while there are many benefits to using social media, we must also address the potential consequences of the overuse and abuse of it. Social media platforms can be abused to manipulate opinion by spreading misinformation and selecting message sources. Evidence suggests that the more these platforms spread emotionally charged content, the wider audience spread it achieves. Consequently, the shared content on social media can potentially go viral, resulting in increased audience reach. Social media platforms thus can intensify negative misconceptions, and prejudice can be intensified by distributing offensive information and fake news. Additionally, social media platforms are often used to control and repress individuals by preventing the flow of adverse ideas and stifling opposing voices and opinions. As the public sphere continues to evolve, social media will continue to be a crucial tool for social change. However, to say that social media platforms are the cause of social change is a statement that needs to be scrutinized and proved. History is replete with news of people who protested and toppled governments long before the internet and Facebook. Communication between the then rebellious masses was face-to-face through direct human interaction. Unfortunately, the face-to-face medium goes unnoticed or receives sporadic attention nowadays. While social media platforms were introduced to help in creating opportunities for a person or a group's message to be seen and heard, experience has shown that these platforms can set up their own ideological criteria to monopolize the online space by blocking information sources. Social media users are thus subjected to the view and rules of platform administrators. There are, therefore, as the ethical and legal framework for a just social media public sphere requires ensuring the right to express uncensored, confrontational, or unpopular views, the integrity of individuals, and the value of their privacy must be protected. The advantage of these platforms are undeniable, but social media can also have negative effects in our society. In addition to increasing the vulnerability to provide violations, experience has shown that social media can do aggressive negative misconceptions and prejudices, as well as spread cyberbullying. By connecting people, social media is often used to spread rumor and to manipulate public opinion. What we are witnessing today is social media tolerance that ignores life matters and turns to cheap, attraction without giving sufficient attention to developing a real climate of interaction between citizens with each other. Priority is given to structural changes at the expense of ethics and professionalism, which leads to the spread of culture far from social responsibility, dominated by a bazaar mentality. As a result, the freedom to interact with the common person is confused with the freedom to pursue material or emotional profit. It is important to consider the ethical issues that arise when we engage in social media. These media can provide a platform for people to harass, shame, and bully other individuals with relative anonymity. In addition, we need to be conscious of the potential psychological effect of social media use. Such an addiction and cyberbullying, an obsessive focus on social media can become an addiction. It also can construct online relationships at the expense of real relationships and hinders people from engaging in realistic social interaction by neglecting their relationships in the real world and disconnecting them from people around them. Now I can move to talk a little bit about the Arab social media. Practice in the Arab world has shown that the real difficulty is in what might be called the integration of technologies with the social structure. The adoption of social media technologies causes a new style of work, a new way of production, and even new content. These technologies are usually imported from countries that are culturally different from us and do not necessarily fit our culture or way of life. From here, we must adapt imported technologies to our needs and conditions. Social media platforms are double-edged swords. They can raise important issues, put them on the agenda of citizen debate, and positively affect their awareness. On the other hand, they can contribute to the destruction of national values or achievements. A serious negative consequence of the use of social media is the low level of communication in the public sphere, which results in abandoning the discussion of important life matters and the possibilities of turning them into immoral, marginal, and unhelpful matters. Another downside of indulgence in social media, which is given little attention by Arab scholars, is the weakening of the Arabic language as a result of the use of foreign characters in writing Arabic. It is clear that the new social media platforms can play an important role in shaping events in the Arab world. There is no doubt that Facebook, Twitter, and mobile phones have contributed to the rapid dissemination and transfer of information to those who are generally not in their contact. These platforms can potentially contribute to the amplifying development. However, the absence of Arab media policies and plans that link the social media platform with other institutions of society has led to the media chaos and cultural entropy. Media platforms in the Arab world are becoming a serious magnifier of the dealing with under-the-surface racial and religious prejudices that presently plague the communication scene in the Arab world. The problem of Arab social media platforms appears to be mainly from the lack, or rather the inability of Arab planners to develop clear plans and policies linking various social institutions to the goals of their society as a whole. Social media platforms can, indeed, produce the type of modernizing or change messages and themes that are typical in Western media platforms. But these messages and themes are often alien to their own cultural norms and will certainly introduce cultural entropy. Adopting entropic messages and themes may result in having our societies pay a high price and to the neglect of basic development needs. Modernization is not achieved by adapting the problems of developed societies that we generally have nothing to do with. Rather, it often leads to neglecting the actual problems of society. A pressing question we must address when deliberating about this ethical structure of social media platforms in the Arab world is it possible, and how, to use the social media in ways other than those in which they are currently used, so that this Arab world, at the level of countries as well as individuals, can preserve the various humanizing advantages and increase the possibilities of the weak, the poor, and even the ignorant to participate effectively in decisions that reflect their lives, whether at the level of society or individual. The problem facing Arab culture does not lie in the issue of media freedom or disorder, as much as it lies in the issue of the freedom of the citizen and the rehabilitation in their field of democratic participation in their society. The development of cultural being requires exerting effort to control the progress of technologies, lest we reach a state in which we are unable to control these technologies economically or even humanly. There should also be caution against embracing a misconception of democracy. We must recognize the eternal dilemma facing Arab societies in choosing between effectiveness and justice, and between influence and freedom. Cultural and media problems on the cultural and media pollution in the Arab world must be given more attention and importance. We have certainly reached a very advanced stage of importing media platforms that have the greatest impact on polluting our culture and the minds of Arab masses. Sorry. إلى بعد عندي شوية معلش لازم وقف يعني بدك وقف. The most important issue we need to address in this path is the assessment of important social media platforms in light of the needs of our societies. Such an objective requires a focus on the socializing impact of the social media on the users, as well as tracing the work of the social media platforms and their operators. These platforms allow users of varying benefits and functions. Hence, it is reasonable to advocate for the regulation of the use of these means through the development of policies that are based on the needs of our societies and thus emerge from or are in harmony with our culture. It is necessary, therefore, to establish controls that allow confronting the onslaught of foreign culture and media. Such controls require the regulation of the flow of social media and cultural programs and materials that may have a negative impact on our society. This approach will be the avenue for a common Arab culture and media platform that emerges from our needs. In order for this quest to succeed, we must begin by strengthening the basic elements of social media and cultural production. The dominance of social media platform designed for the public that is culturally and morally different from ours has resulted in our cultural exchange becoming less culturally equivalent. The level of our culture has dropped, and it has become a mere commodity to which the provisions employ that what applies to other material goods in a Western-dominated world order. The present world order narrows the field of competition and contributes to undermining the sovereignty of national culture in the course of a concerted, intense foreign cultural and values pressures. Western values have become dominant in the programs of our social platform. By entering a confused modernity and the structure of our civic education, even our family structure has been affected. Foreign cultures are popularized to the Arab common people, and thus the media operating within the current world order are contributing to making national culture alien to the common Arab person. This is usually carried out within the so-called modernization process, during which culture is codified and its attention is diverted towards universality, or so that traditional values and arts are localized, so that traditional values and arts that localize culture disappear, and we see Western popular culture blending with our popular culture and sometimes even swallowing it. The advancement of Arab human communication potentials entails its harmony with national development needs. Long-term principles and rules that guide the performance of Arab media systems are required. Its orientation should be determined by the analysis and identification of existing practices, as well as on the formulation of new principles and rules appropriate to the achievement of desired objectives. The social media platforms have freed the communication process from many of the restrictions that used to limit the communication of individuals and groups. However, the manipulation of these platforms is particularly feasible to those who possess who possess advanced technologies and equipment. Here lies the danger of the domination of technologically and materially advanced countries over the lagging countries in this field, as well as the danger of commercial enterprises controlling the way the public consumes these media. The mental energy generated by interactive media technologies are produced or managed by transnational corporations, and these transnational institutions control the channels of communication in growth-seeking countries. Social media do not operate in a vacuum, but within a social reality, so they must operate in the context of the social and ethical responsibilities of their society. This is an important factor in the formation of mental understanding or awareness of the citizen's view of their society and the world. The content provided by social media platforms, such as cultural entertainment or other messages, does not necessarily lead to the realization of the truth, but contributes to the formulation of a new hyper-reality that contributes to the westernization of our youth. The present hegemony of foreign countries, of foreign cultures on of our interaction channels and their content has led to the alienation of the Arab public rather than the facilitating their participation in society. This alienation is often carried out through providing a content that is not connected to the Arab cultural reality, which prompts the common people to revolt against their own values and lifestyle. Social media platforms can play an enormous role in distracting people from their local problems and turn their attention away from their real social and national problems to focus on important foreign and superficial ones. A reflective contribution to our present discussion about social media here is perhaps the discussion of the impact of globalization on the Arab world by two renowned Moroccan scholars, Muhammad Abed al-Jabri and Abdelaziz Belqaziz. The new social media platform brought about in the Arab world what Belqaziz terms as an overflow in a society's need for gratification that will kill the soul and take away the moral and human content of people's behavior. It will cause the individual to acquire an immunity deficiency disease. Belqaziz calls for reflecting about strategic approaches to adapt our culture and society to the challenge posed by globalization. According to Belqaziz, perspective social media lays down a new revolution in history whose strength will be the human group instead of the state and national group. He argues that what is termed today as cultural globalization is not the transition from an era of local and national cultures to a new higher culture, which is world culture. Rather, it is an act of cultural usurpation and symbolic aggression against other cultures. Belqaziz contends that the true world culture is the cultures of all societies without exception and not merely Western culture. Muhammad Abed al-Jabri, on the other hand, proposes that by controlling cognition, the new media extracts the effectiveness of the mind. The logic behind the logic adapts and the value system is disrupted. He suggests that this produces a culture of penetration, which is based on a set of illusions aimed at normalization and hegemony, and the consolidation of civilizational subordination. Al-Jabari argues that one of the results of the culture of penetration is the occurrence of duality and schism within the Arab cultural identity is split between tradition and modernity. However, Al-Jabri warns against taking a position of total closure. He warns against taking a position of total closure as a reaction to cultural globalization, as well against the total acceptance of globalization or alienation, and calls for the need to renew Arab culture from within and rebuilding it and participating and practicing modernity, seeking aspects of understanding and interpretation of its course, allows linking the present with the past in a direction of the future. One of the important aspects of Al-Jabri's probe of globalization highlights that what should be done and what should be rejected. In the face of cultural globalization, he stresses the importance of employing rationality and democracy in this probe and calls for the renewal of Arab culture from within by linking the present with the past and in the direction of the future. Now, my concluding remarks here. Discussing the future of social media, I Am Bogus maintains that it's never felt more plausible that the age of social media might end, and soon. He cautions that if change is possible, carrying it would be more difficult because we have adapted our lives to confront the social media's pleasures and bothers. It's seemingly as hard to give up on social media as it is to give up on smoking en masse. We did so slowly and over time by forcing social life to suffocate the practice. That process must now begin in earnest for social media. Kate Lindsay qualifies that to ensure a just social media public sphere, a strong ethical and legal structure must be established and adhered to by all involved. This is not done by regulatory degrees, but is rather a social process. Indeed, addressing the mounting problems of the social media needs a social process approach and not mere regularity measures. The rapid and entropic development in the field of Arab social media has resulted in an addiction to a new type of social reality that is not ethically or legally useful. Thus, this addiction is too firm to be brought to an end by immediate regularity decision. The necessary regulation need is to be part of an excessive long-term social process. This social process approach requires meaningful communication strategies that will bring about a change in thinking and acting. It is necessary to introduce positive roles for individuals and groups that help accept and promote positive change, as well as the development of local ideas and visions into practical plans for social development. To address this, Arab social media public need to be directed towards engaging in qualitative and positive message production by providing interactive material related to the reality of their society. Important culturally irrelevant programs that may contribute to the alienation of the common person needs to be subjected to regulation. If well-regulated, social media platforms can contribute to the formation of a new consciousness that launches the possibility of new social development. Failure to develop policy-based plans for regulating and the functioning of social media has led to the transformation of our social media platform into means of discordant identity and values, means of social development. Building a productive and effective Arab public requires special efforts to prevent the use of interactive means from developing into a situation where the society is unable to control it economically, humanly, and morally. Public planners must develop media policies that generate social media platforms and able to reserve the people. It should be emphasized that calling for a media policy and planning should not mean centralized orientation, but should be seen as a method of rational development of various interactive media activities. Proper planning opens up possible alternative proposals, allows for flexibility and innovation, and provides opportunities for creativity. Proper planning does not reject traditional communication systems and interactive practices simply because they are drawn from the past. In cases where these traditional systems are out of sync with future goals, they can be developed to integrate this with new social media and thus fits these goals. Thank you.
نتقدم بالشكر الجزيل للأستاذ الدكتور نبيل دجاني.
We would like to thank Dr. Nabil Dajani for this very valuable presentation, very thorough discussion of an issue related to the ethics of a new social media. So this was discussed from different angles, raising a lot of questions and opening opportunities for dialogue. There's something that I remembered specifically, which is related to the necessity of realizing that this continuous dilemma before the Arab communities in choosing between effectiveness and justice, between hegemony, power, and freedom. So this requires more work on fighting media and cultural pollution. So I think only this sentence could be discussed for hours. The presentation also raised important topics, for example, regulations and regulatory policies for digital and social media platforms, and justice and democracy. The cultural rapprochement due to cultural globalization, and also calling for modern content, but not like the Western modernity, because this is an approach that doesn't rely on traditional communication means, as Mr. Dajani said. It also works on creating a new awareness that creates possibilities for new social development. We open the floor for discussion. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nabil. I think it was a very scientific and realistic approach, even though, unlike what you said at the beginning, that's very pessimistic regarding social media. What we've heard is indeed a scientific perception, a realistic one, that looks at this approach as an international
phenomenon that doesn't only overshadow the Arab world but also the whole world.
يمكن أن تتحول إلى نوع من الورشات اللي يمكن أن تفتح المجال لنقاش معمق في منطقتنا العربية، خاصة إذا تعلق الأمر بموضوع الحوكمة. ولكن من هنا أنا أريد أن يعني أمر إلى تعليق ثم سؤال هو
So I would like to ask you something.
فهم هذه الظاهرة وتداعياتها. يعني إحنا هذه الظاهرة
If we are to understand this phenomenon,
رغم النوع من المحاذير التي تطرح في المنطقة العربية حول اللغة، حول الثقافة، حول السلوكيات، حول تسطيح
if we are to talk about culture, behavior, and the flatification of the culture, this is not something that only affects the Arab world, and this is real. When looking at literature, we see this mentioned. I've lived in the West for 20 years and then in the Arab world, so we see that this phenomenon affects everyone almost at the same level. And the influence could also be positive in terms of allowing freedom of expression, allowing minorities to express themselves, maybe operating a change or changing the narratives. And the discourse in some causes like the Palestinian cause. So I think this phenomenon has to be understood as such. So here I would like to say that the approach should also be global, that is entering a dialogue and saying that our culture was affected, our language was affected, as if we live in a void. So I think you can hear the same complaints from the different peoples of the world, not only our region. So I think this should be a topic to be discussed by the United Nations, the General Assembly, the League of Arab Nations, etc. So sorry for having been lengthy. Thank you. Thank you for this excellent presentation. I do agree with you. This is an issue for the whole world, including the developing world. But I disagree with you when you say that all societies have the same problems. I was a member in an advisory commission of the UNESCO Secretary General in the 70s. Back then, we were assessing the situation in different countries. Unfortunately, the Latin America was lagging behind back then, but now it's much closer to Northern America. Even Africa is way ahead of us. I think that in the media domain we are lagging behind. Our Arab region most desperately needs conscious media policies. We lack the necessary talents to devise those policies, not because we don't have experts. Our experts are being used to develop those policies. We have an issue with governance, which is a real problem, because we don't have good policies and good governance, unfortunately.
شكرا دكتور نبيل ديجاني.
Pessimism about the future of humanity with these current practices of social media. And I think this is a logical conclusion because there is a tremendous gap here between what we hoped from social media when it emerged in the beginning of the 21st century, and what the people expect from social media to be harnessed for marginalized voices and defend justice and freedom and human dignity and provide equal opportunities for all humankind to choose their representatives in political and governing spaces. However, what happened faster than we may ever imagined is the hegemonic powers networks become more stronger than ever. Organic surveillance becomes structural and deeply rooted in the almost every aspect of our daily life practices. Our privacy is totally invaded with biometrical parameters everywhere. So, what I think could be the synchrony of this reality? I think there are here two trajectories. The first trajectory is to work with the people. It's to stay educating the people and defending the basic human rights, because I doubt now, especially with the young generation, that they believe that they are entitled with full human rights. They think that maybe dictatorship is good for somehow. They think that they do not need democracy. They can get whatever they like without these basic human rights. And this is another problem we have to face. So we have to keep calling for and defending and backing humans and that they deserve to enjoy these rights. And the other trajectory is in predating a technological moment that will come one day, just like the same moment of the Arab Spring, but there is no strong predators, national predators, loyal predators, to invest this moment for the good of the people. We have to invest this technological moment that will come one day with high potentiality to create social and political transformation. So this is just a comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I agree with you, but the basic problem is getting the people to sort of take or understand the basic values that we teach them in school, but they don't really translate them to reality. And here we have the problem of governance. The Arab world lacks a proper system of governance that allows the people to interpret what is given to them. Like, I'll give an example, my country in Lebanon. I think the Lebanese are most informed people about what's going on in the world. But unfortunately, they interpret these things in terms of their sectarian orientation or within their governance system, whereby you know that this is bad, but this is what your leader wants, and therefore your leader knows more than what is real. So the problem is, what I'm trying to say is the change that is needed for developing countries, particularly in the Arab world, is a social process. It has to be approached from a social process approach, whereby it's educational. It has to go through a long phase of bringing the common person to a real understanding of his and his group's needs, and not to see these needs within the governance system that he has been taught that this is the proper governance system in which his country operates. This is a problem I see in my country. I'm sure you see it in Egypt, and I'm sure all Arabs will see it within their governance system.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أولا أشكرك من قلبي بروفيسور دجاني. المحاضرة قيمة وفيها الجديد والمثير والشيق.
Brings newness to this topic, and I learned a lot in this presentation and your previous articles. There are many researchers that tried to adopt a critical reformist path. What I would like to comment on is how you explored dealing with the issues related to social media, and you focused on the fact that the starting point should be of a social aspect, and you said that the ethical and legal dimensions are also very important. So if we take the legal dimension to deal with all the issues that you highlighted, law is the a resort of Arab governments, and the outcome would be counter to what we would have hoped for, and in most cases the law would lead to more restrictions. So the only window is that despite social media platforms being filled with issues, however, they present a certain freedom space more than conventional media, and therefore betting on the legal dimension will not bear fruits. It will be rather risky. Another dimension you mentioned, which is social dimension and the social starting point, this raises a deeper problematic, which is that in our world, and usually in the developing world, politics take over the economic and social dimensions. Once again, we go back to the center of power in the developing world, where politics take over the social sphere, and therefore we would be ahead of a dead end. So if we will look into alternatives of a social nature to counter what is being imported, this might be weak, as it lacks support, it lacks funding, and so forth. And if it turns to media for support, it would lose its autonomy and would lead to a lack of popular trust, the trust of people, and therefore would lead it to become less influenced. So this is a compound problem. I do not have an answer to it, but I hope you could enrich this discussion on how we could deal with this issue. Thank you for your comment. I do agree with you, but let me explain here. I want to apologize to you here. I am not good at reading my articles. I'm an old man, I'm 86, and I reached a point where it's easier for me to speak rather than read, and I wasn't able to see clearly what I had written. When I talk about the law, I do not mean the law per se. I'd rather use the term governance. Governance encompasses law. And let me give you the example of my country, Lebanon. We do have laws. We do have good laws, but we have bad governance. The law is not implemented. And there are different opinions to the law. So I rather prefer to use the word governance. And the governance that we need, for it to be good, it is a social process. It takes its due course. Citizens should be taught and trained on the good participation in society. Unfortunately, we lack such good governance. And allow me to use Lebanon as an example. We do have the laws. However, the governance that we have leads citizens to think differently. So a Christian citizen would see things or interpret things differently than a Muslim citizen in Lebanon. And this holds true for almost all developing countries. Good governance does not rely on law only. It rather, or it needs to ensure equality among people and ensure a similar or a unified manner in interpreting laws. Definitely, laws are important. However, a good law is of no relevance if there is no good governance. So I do agree with what you said, but I'd rather again insist on the need to have good governance and not the law itself. In the same vein as what Dr. Bassiouni said, you talked about the fact that this is a social process and it's a long-term process, and that there is a need to have some controls and regulation of social media, and that there should be an involvement from other institutions here. So I do agree with you that this is a social process and a long-term one. But what should be done? Since, for instance, on the issue of good governance. So what do we need? To have the basis laid in education, for instance? Because I do notice a schism between formal education and informal education, specifically when it comes to ethics. So could you please clarify what you mean exactly by this long-term process? Could you please elaborate on that? Let me go back to the 70s when I was in the consultative committee of the UNESCO. We created the COM-MD20, and I hope you would be able to read this version. We created like a blueprint in relation to the implementation. So the social process starts first by collecting information about existing media, their scope, and the first step starts with collecting information. Based on such information, it is possible to put in place policies that are gradual to reach social awareness and develop not only media outlets, but also media literacy. Media literacy on the how to use information that is garnered through social media and the media in general. If you go back to this document that dates back to the 70s and produced by the UNESCO, it's a good read. Unfortunately, this is not being used. I can speak about my experience about urging Lebanon to adopt this document. Unfortunately, so I request, or the UNESCO requested me to present this document to the Lebanese government. I submitted it to the President of the Republic. He was very impressed, and he told me go to the Minister of Education to implement it. And he said, like, it's a very good document, and if the President wants it to be implemented, it's good. Let's see how we can form a committee to implement it. And he started saying, let's see who among the Muslims we can have a member of this committee, and how many Christians to do so. And when he did so, I told him, thank you so much. This document will never be implemented. So this is the case in developing countries and in Arab countries. Good governance leads to good policies, and unfortunately, this is what we're missing. شكرا لك
your key findings that we need to do something to make the digital media much more connected. Yesterday we heard from different speakers about the need to have genuine participation, engagement, and deliberations that support, social transformation and democratization. I wanted to, in terms of the concrete steps or measures that we can do to make sure that the social and cultural impact of the digital is much more meaningful. There is also something called Public Service Internet Manifesto. Some of my colleagues at the University of Westminster were advancing this. I don't know whether you heard about it, but it's the idea of taking, the public service media ideas into the digital age so that we can reconfigure these platforms. These platforms are run normally on commercial basis, which are very hostile to social cohesion, which are, we heard yesterday, for example, about hate speech, which can generate income. The more people argue, the more participation. So their model is not very good for social engagement, for social transformation, and the cultural uses that you were hinting at. So at the moment, our hope could be to foster these public service media ideas on the digital to make sure that some of those ideals about, I think Professor Mchairo talked about, how do we know, genuine participation? The idea to engender, justice, participation, and what you were talking about, that there is need to connect, not just with a few people, but with the rest of society, the individual, the group. At the moment, I think our best hope is to make sure that the internet is reconfigured, that we need to also bring forward some of the public service television ideas, public service newspapers ideas. Can we also duplicate that in the digital age to make sure that there is public service internet platforms that could be providing a public service remit in the digital age to encourage debate, participation, and advancement of social cohesion. So I don't know in this region whether we can draw from some of those public service ideas, cultural ideas that are public service. You have a very good, cultural fabric where people come together, like, tomorrow, Friday prayers. There are some public engagements that could be used to bring together, people together for the common good. There are clear examples where people are willing to become members of a public body. So in the digital age, to what extent, my question is, to what extent can we, from our different vantage point, you were talking about the Arab region vantage point, can we bring these big technology companies to bear some public service ideals? To what extent can we do that? Can we foster these public service ideals? Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. I think you touched on a very important issue, and an issue that really is crucial. We talk about public need and public service. Now, we have to define what we mean by need and what we need by service. And here is the problem. When we say we provide what the public needs, but what do the public need? This is very important. Should we give people who need things, for instance, do they need opium? If they need opium, should we give it to them? Should we give them things that are harmful? But then, who decides what is harmful and what's not harmful? Now, these issues are important. What is public service? What is the public service? Is it when we call it for public debate? Should we encourage any public debate? Should the media provide public debate on any issue that the public wants, issues that are irrelevant? Should we talk, for instance, in my society, should we talk about homosexuality, which in our society is legally banned? Or should we? Now, it is an important issue. I'm not saying it's not important, but is it the issue that my society needs? In other words, when we talk about public debate, public service, and so on, we need the proper planning to sort of have public debate on issues that are crucial for development of our society. Unfortunately, the public debate that the West requires from countries like ours are issues, debate on issues that are relevant to their societies, not to ours. Our problems are different than the problems of other societies. So really, I'm in agreement with you in general. Yes, public need, public service, public debate, all these are important. But what type of needs, what type of service, what type of debate? These are things. Now, I'm not saying that governments should determine these, but what I'm talking about, these needs have to be part of a social process determined by experts, by knowledgeable people that do not emerge only from their own way of thinking, but on a real study of the developmental, social, national, and cultural needs of a society. Thank you.
شكرا بروفيسور دجاني. اعتقد ما يقصده بروفيسور مانو من الببليك سيرفيس.
I believe that what Mr. Mano said is a different type of media, be that conventional media or social media. And we mean by that social media that are not funded or run by governments or businessmen. And this is a pattern or a media that is media that is available in European countries such as the BBC. The public service could be a good starting point that would converge with what you said about the long-term social process to deal with the issues of social media as currently seen. An analysis of a social media platform concluded that 98% of social media platforms were profit-making, with the exception of two, and the analysts called them public service media. One is Wikipedia, and the second was the official website of the BBC. Thank you. Allow me here to be the devil's advocate, even if a state or a profit-making entities are funding or behind these platforms. Any person who has, and every person has the intention to serve, but if this intention is, rather than being built on personal motives, if it's not built on a social plan, it would fail and would be damaging. But maybe, for instance, a person's view of development in a society, it might not be in harmony with the development plan that is needed in a state, for instance. So I believe that we need to start with good social policies and plans. Every person or entity could thankfully do that, but this should fall as part of a social plan, because developing countries, and specifically Arab countries, they do need good planning. It doesn't suffice to allow citizens or residents to partake, but we need to have a good plan. It has to be carefully tailored, agreed upon, well discussed by development experts first. Good morning, Professor. I have a question. Do you think that the West's monopoly of social media and the media could lead to a certain delay the development social cultural level? What do we have in our Arab world? Is the media playing a positive role? Unfortunately, no, it plays a negative role. Do we see any social awareness? Unfortunately not. Do we have aware societies in the Arab world? Definitely, there are many important issues that are being highlighted by the media. However, let me go back to planning. The media plans. Before a child is allowed to drive a car, he has to be taught how to drive a car and trained on it. So our public needs training on social participation or social engagement, and needs media literacy to understand what could serve them and how to analyze what is of benefit for them in social media. As we grow, we need training. When we reach a point where we can drive the car, yes, we will be driving the car, but we are still in a phase where we're starting to mature. But we are still in childhood. We still need awareness on how to harness social media and media outlets. Before being able to use it with absolute freedom, we need first to know how to use this energy or these resources. Are there any further questions? With that, we come to the end of our session. I would like to thank you, Professor, and I would like to thank the audience for the important comments and questions to Mr. Nabil Dajani's presentation. We shall take the coffee break before resuming the second session of our day. Thank you.
Used social media networks to manage their wars and conflicts. What is the role of these networks in ideological polarization? How can they be used to promote democracy and human rights?